Guys, it's Laura. Welcome back to another video. So in this one, I'm going to be wrapping up all the books that I've read so far in the month of February. I feel like it is a little bit earlier than usual for me to do a mid-month wrap up, but it is a shorter month, so it works out somehow. But I have completed a total of 6 things. Let me see. Yeah, 6 things so far, so I'll go ahead and talk to you about those. The first book I finished in the month of February was The Voice in My Head. This is by Dana L. Davis, and this was an incredible surprise as to how much I loved this book. I listened to this on audio, which I highly suggest the audiobook if you're interested in reading this, because the audiobook was done really, really well. So this is about Indigo. Indigo is 18 years old. She has a twin sister named Violet. Her twin sister is unfortunately terminally ill, and she doesn't really have much longer to live. She's dealing with a lot of pain due to her illness. She doesn't want to just suffer and wait to die. So she's planning to take her life by medically assisted suicide or medically assisted death. And Indigo is absolutely devastated by this. She doesn't know how to live without her twin sister. And so at the beginning of this novel, Indigo is planning on taking her life. She climbs up to this very tall building and she's planning on jumping. But right before she jumps, she hears this voice in her head. And this voice says that he's God. And he says that if she takes her sister to this really famous hike in Arizona called the Wave, then her sister will live. Of course, she thinks she's having some kind of psychotic break, but afterwards she decides to listen to this voice because she's pretty much desperate at this point for her sister to live. Through a little bit of convincing, we end up having the whole family go on this road trip to Arizona, and they get a ride on this big bus by their kind of eccentric new age pastor, and hilarity ensues. This was so unbelievably funny, which is great because it's dealing with such a really devastating, really hard-hitting topic, but I loved the way that the author integrated this really great humor in order to soften those really harder bits. Throughout this entire book, I was either laughing or crying. There was no in between. It was so emotional and so deep as far as the right to death when you're terminally ill, and just some of the situations that they got into along this road trip was absolutely funny, but was also touching on very important topics. This was pretty much my perfect book. I absolutely love the use of humor in books, and I find it to be a big hit or miss for me because I guess I have kind of a weird sense of humor. I don't know. A lot of the things that other people find funny, I do not find funny. And a lot of things that people don't find funny, I find really funny. So I just think that this was the right kind of humor for me. And it was just so emotionally pulling, and you really got the point of it in the end of what it really means to live your life instead of just existing. I just think that it was done so incredibly beautifully. Like I said, I laughed so hard, I cried so hard, I was sobbing by the end of this novel. Loved Dana L. Davis's writing, and I cannot wait to read more from her in the future. I ended up giving The Voice in My Head a 5 out of 5 stars, and it's honestly probably gonna be on my favorites list from this year because I loved it that much. The next book I read was Astrophysics for People in a Hurry. This is by Neil deGrasse Tyson. I think I picked this book up almost as soon as it came out. I am a huge lover of learning about the world and the universe and kind of our place in it and where we come from. And I think that this was just such a great kind of introduction to that almost. This gives you a great overview of astrophysics in ways that you can understand while also being very complex. And also along with Neil deGrasse Tyson's witty way of putting things, it made this perfect. I listened to this on audiobook because Neil deGrasse Tyson narrates the audiobook himself, and it was really reading this book was like sitting down with a friend over a coffee and just talking about the universe. And I just really love this. I think it was absolutely great. Again, this is another one I gave 5 out of 5 stars. I definitely recommend it if you haven't picked it up yet. It's a really, really good one. Next, I picked up this comic, which is Malika, Warrior Queen Volume 1. This is by Roy Akupe, and I enjoyed this for the most part. I think that I had a different idea of what this was going to be going into it, but this is basically like all war strategy and political maneuverings. And because of that, I didn't enjoy it as much as I was hoping to. I think that the art is really, really beautiful. I absolutely adore the art. What I really loved about this is the fact that it is based on ancient African, specifically ancient West African history. Like the names for different cities were all based on actual historical African places. And also the people in here were also based on actual African cultures. And so I really, really enjoyed that. In between chapters, we get like a little map and sort of a history of that area, like a real history of that area and those people and how that inspired this comic. So I thought that that was very interesting. And I think I enjoyed that more than the actual story. Did I even say what this is about? Basically, we're following this young warrior queen. When we first enter the story, she's dealing with quelling this rebellion amongst her people. And then she ends up facing a threat from a neighboring kingdom that comes and tries to subjugate the people. And so she is trying to save her land, facing these almost insurmountable odds because this kingdom has an army 3 times the size as hers. But because she's so skilled in warfare, she is able to find a way using her battle skills and some magic to defeat these people. There is an uprising of people within her council that are against her. And so I guess some of the later volumes will go into her kind of dealing with that. So that's what it's about. I did enjoy it. I really enjoyed the art. And I ended up giving this a 3 out of 5 stars. The next thing I read was actually a very, very short story. It's only about 23 pages. And this was available for free on the Tor.com website. But this is called St. Valentine, St. Abigail, St. Bridget by C.L. Polk. So C.L. Polk is an author that I've been interested in for a while because she wrote the Witchmark series. And that is a series that I'm interested in reading. So when I saw this available, I decided to go ahead and pick it up and give it a try. I don't want to say too much about this because I don't want to spoil anything. It is very, very short, but we're basically following the daughter of a witch. And she ends up developing feelings for this girl in her class. She falls in love with her, and this story is about kind of the lengths that she goes to in order to protect her. And while I thought that this short story was incredibly well written, it was a little bit too abstract for me. I feel like the ending just kind of happened and I didn't really get the point of the book. However, it's one of those really quiet, haunting type stories because it makes you think. And I'm going to put a picture of it on the screen, but like this cover art is absolutely stunning. I don't know who the artist is, but I just want like an art print of this on my wall because it's so gorgeous. I ended up giving that one a 3 out of 5 stars and I recommend checking it out. Okay, so I'm gonna kind of go out of order because I don't want to end on a bad note. So I'm going to talk about this book next, which is the last book that I finished so far this month. It is Washington Black by Essie Adugin. This seems to be a very well-loved novel as far as I can tell, and it seems to be very critically acclaimed, and I just did not enjoy this. We're following a young slave boy named George Washington Black. He goes by Wash for short. And Wash is living on this plantation in Barbados and is obviously dealing with a very, very hard life. One day, the plantation owner's brother, who I forget his name now, but he goes by Titch. Everyone calls him Titch. He comes to this plantation and he is sort of like a scientist and inventor. He has this contraption that he's building called a cloud cutter, basically like a hot air balloon, and wants to set sail and cross the Atlantic. However, he needs help doing this. So he borrows Wash from his brother to kind of become his assistant, and the two of them develop this friendship. And because of events that I won't mention, Wash ends up having to escape the plantation in fear of his life. So he goes with Titch in this cloud cutter, and then it turns into this kind of adventure, and then the story just takes a lot of twists and turns from there. So I would say that this is like one part slave narrative, one part adventure story, one part coming of age, except that nothing really happens. We do follow Wash. At the beginning of the story, he's like 11 or 12 years old, and we follow him until he's like 18, 19. And we follow him throughout his life and kind of what happens to him. And I just didn't get it. I don't know. This is a very like literary style novel, and I don't know if I just didn't get it. I feel like there was absolutely no point to this story, and it started out so good. The writing really drew me in because it is very well written. There's no denying that. But the more it went on, the less I was interested. It felt like the main character Wash developed this sort of obsession with Titch, and this may be a spoiler, so you might want to skip ahead a little bit. He ends up losing Titch at some point and has to continue on his journey by himself, and he becomes obsessed with wanting to find Titch. And I feel like this story becomes him searching for this man across the world, basically. When there is possibly a reunion, there's like nothing gained, and then it just ends. Okay, it just ends, and I'm like, what was the point of this? I just don't get it. And I don't know, maybe it's me, maybe I'm just not smart enough to get it, but I did. And I ended up really not enjoying my time reading this because I felt like there was just nothing to this story. So I did not like this book. I ended up giving it a 2 out of 5 stars. I would probably read more from Essie Adugin in the future because I feel like her writing was really, really good. I just thought that the story was, it just wasn't for me. It just wasn't what I thought it was going to be, I guess. I was expecting more of a grand adventure tale, and it really was not that. But this next book I enjoyed so much, and that is The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin. I get it now. Everyone talks about this book and how amazing it is. It won a Hugo Award. Every book in this series won a Hugo Award, which is huge. And I totally get why. This was the most incredibly mind-blowing book that I've ever read. I've never read a book that was structured in this way, and the plot twist was insane. It takes place in a world where the earth is constantly devastated by these huge earthquakes, volcanic eruptions. There's only one huge continent and no other land anywhere else that are constantly quaking and shaking. The earth is not still, but ironically, this continent is called the Stillness. Fifth season is what they call kind of an extended winter where the earth just gets devastated by either because of an earthquake or other kind of natural disaster that is so huge that it completely, like, it's world ending. It's completely destructive. The world gets torn apart, society gets torn apart, and in this world there are people called origines who have the ability to control the earth. And instead of being revered or even respected, they are treated as second-class citizens, basically less than slaves. The origine is completely outlawed in this society, and the only time origines are allowed to perform their magic and their skill is if they are sent to the fulcrum, which is this place where origines are raised, taught to control their magic, and are also heavily controlled and heavily imprisoned, basically. We're following 3 different perspectives. The first perspective is of Isun, who is an origin, however, she is living in hiding. So she's living in a normal community, a normal society, and outside of the fulcrum. She comes home one day to find that her son was brutally beaten to death by her husband, and her husband kidnapped her daughter. She sets out to find her husband and kill him and rescue her daughter. The second perspective we're following is of a young girl named Zamaya who has just discovered to be an origin, and so she is taken away from her family and sent to the fulcrum in order to be trained and controlled. And the third perspective we follow is Cyanite, who has reached a certain level of ability as far as an origin. They use rings to determine kind of what their abilities are, and she currently has 4 rings. And she is going out on kind of this assignment to take care of a certain town that has an issue that only an origin can solve. And all of this is happening at the start of a new season where there was this massive quake in the capital of this empire, which sets off this chain of events that is world ending. Like the tagline on the book says, this is the way the world ends for the last time. So this is a big one, probably one of the biggest seasons that they've seen in many thousand years. And the way that the perspectives intertwine is so, it was so unique. I really don't think that I've seen anything done like this before. The way that it was written was so unique and so incredibly smart. This is probably the smartest book that I've ever read, just in the way that it was constructed, in the way that everything was put together. We get these clues, we get these very subtle clues throughout the narrative that makes us really think about what is really going on here, because we get these slow reveals as the characters get these reveals, but then we also get hints as to what's missing, you know, what is really at the root of the problem here. And oh my God, that was good. It was so good. I remember finishing this book. I was in bed and I was just sitting in bed with my hand on my head, crying, just having my mind completely blown by the end of this book. And I know there's so much that I wanted to say about this book and I really can't think right now. I think I just need to get the second book in this series and read it. I am so excited to do so. I loved the main character of Asun. You really, really feel for her because of what she's dealing with, and especially as a mother, it was very raw, very emotional. Also, I loved the parallels to our current society, to things like racism and colorism. Were done in this sort of fantasy dystopian type setting, but paralleled so well to our current world and society. There were so many quotes in here that were so profound and so deep that I absolutely loved. And this book is just a book unlike anything I have ever read, and I so highly recommend this book. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars, obviously, and I cannot wait to continue on in this series and read more from N.K. Jemisin, because I think that she is one of the most brilliant writers that I've ever read in my life. And I'm just so happy that I finally picked up this book, because I've been hearing about it for so long. Absolutely stunning. So those are the 6 books that I've read so far this month. I don't really know how much more I'm going to be able to read, because as I mentioned before in another video, I am moving across the country. I have a lot to do, but hopefully I'll have some more books to talk about by the end of this month. I hope that your reading is going well. Do let me know down in the comments below what you've been reading so far this month, what you've been loving, what's your favorite book so far. If you like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any future videos from me, and I will see you in my next one. Bye guys.